Hi, I'm indie fantasy author Melinda Kucsera, and in this episode of Fantasy, Lore, and More, we have R.M. Krogman, and she's joining me to talk about her book, Sundering, book 2 in her epic fantasy trilogy. So we definitely want to hear all about that. So thank you for coming, and tell me about Sundering.
Sure. Thank you for having me. So Sundering is the second book of 3 in an epic fantasy trilogy. The first book, Liberation, came out last year in September. And so the second book, Sundering, is coming out tomorrow, May 11th, 2024. And so it's just a really exciting next step in this trilogy. I'm working on the third book right now, so everything should be coming on schedule for that third book to come out next year, and then the trilogy will be complete. And so I'm really excited about this second book. I think everybody so far that has read it is telling me that holy cow, it just ramps everything up, which is what the middle book should do. You know, you really start seeing the stakes of the story and understanding the depth of the characters and really getting to know some more secrets of their backstories and things like that. And so I think that people really, really enjoyed that.
Oh, wow. So what is it about, the trilogy?
So the whole trilogy has kind of a lot of themes. The biggest theme, I think, is freedom for the first one, kind of freedom of self-determination, physical freedom, the ability to choose your future. And then the second book is about choice and who do you kind of decide you want to be and how do you decide you want to act once you have that freedom. The third one, I always say, is about love. How do you decide to treat other people once you have decided what kind of person you're going to be? And are you going to sacrifice yourself or are you going to sacrifice others to get what you want? So that's the third book, which is Schism. I don't think I mentioned that before.
Yeah, you said you're working on the third book. I don't think you mentioned the title.
Yeah, Schism. So book 3 is Schism, and it is probably going to be about the same length as the second one. And I'm about 25% done writing it. So it's moving along.
That's what we want to hear. We want to hear these books are coming out. I mean, as a reader, I like hearing that the next one is like in some form of coming soon. Even if there's not like a date on it, that like it is coming. There is that it's not the end. I'm always very excited when I hear that it's not the end, that there's more, that there will be more.
There's going to be a lot more.
Oh, okay. So it's not just going to be a trilogy then.
The trilogy is self-contained, if that makes any sense. It will have one full story arc in it. However, I also have a side series called the Stories of Midgate, and each of them is a standalone story, but they're a little bit shorter. They're not these huge, fat, epic books, but they're intertwined with everything that's going on in the trilogy. So I already have 2 of those out. And I have another one coming out later this summer. That's a full-length novel, but it's not an epic novel. And then after Schism comes out next year, I will have at least one more novella come out that adds more to the story. It's still going to be standalone, but it will be like, oh my goodness, now I really understand this one character. And then after I get through all that stuff, I will be writing a sequel for sure. And then I will start delving into the more ancient history of the world of Midgate. So I already have at least 2 prequel full-length novels planned on that too.
Oh, wow. Wow. This is a sprawling world. I like that. I like
once I got into Midgate, I just decided I didn't want to leave.
I did the same thing. I will next year I'll have 30 books published in the same world.
Amazing. I love it.
Just, look what these characters do. They just keep talking you into more books and more books and more books. And you're like,
they do. Well, they're so complex, it's like I have a protagonist. I have multiple points of view in these epic books particularly, but I have kind of a main character. But the supporting cast is complex as well. They have their own histories. They have their own quirks. Some of them are kind of grumpy. there's reasons for all that, you know? And so all of that backstory, some of it belongs in that main story, but then some of it is really just kind of its own thing, where if you really, really want to get to know that character, you got to read their backstory, and then you'll really understand them. And so that's kind of what the Stories of Midgate series is serving, is providing some of that background while not taking away from the main story.
That's really cool. So there's, how many of those Stories of Midgate are there going to be?
At least 4. So
At least
2
4.
of them are out. I can grab them off the shelf if you think, but the first one is Marked. Marked is a prequel novella set, about 60 some years before this book begins. And it just gives you backstory on a side character, not one of the main characters. And so it really, okay, so this prequel, my goal was to make you remember that you can feel something. And so, like, my goal is to make people cry.
Oh no!
It's a really emotional story. And so I think I have achieved that, because someone told me that they went and cried in the bottom of their shower after they finished reading it. I was like, yes! I mean, sorry, but yes! Like, that's exactly what I wanted. So it's just this really emotional story about this character when he was younger, and understanding the meaning of love, really, and acceptance, and self-acceptance too. And so that book, I recommend people read if they're not sure that they, want to spend the money on the bigger books, because they cost a little more to print. So it's a bigger dedication. Totally get it. These books are way cheaper. And they're on sale tomorrow for like 99 cents. So you can take that risk and decide, hey, do you like this writing? Do you like this world? And if you like this world, man, you should dive in. And so that's Marked. And I love that.
Wait.
That one came out last April.
Yeah, you also gave us a code, which I'm going to put in the show notes and the description, for a percentage off if they buy it through your store. I'm just looking for the details because I forgot. I forgot the amount.
It's code ROGUES. And you can get 15% off direct purchase for signed copies on my website, or any other swag that you want. There's other swag on there too. But I also have marked them down on Amazon if you don't care about signed copies and you just want to get the books to your house as fast as you can. Those are going to be marked down starting tomorrow too. So,
and those on Amazon are on sale for this week, or because I know your code is good for the year.
Yeah, the Rogues code is good for a year, so you can use it for your whole order anytime between now and next year, May 11th or so.
And and you can use it more than once, or is it a one-time code?
It's a one-time code, but you can apply it to the whole order.
Okay. So cool. And I will make sure to mark that in the show notes of the description. So, because that's important to know.
Yes.
I usually don't make them one time because it's like extra effort. Make those and like, whatever. Use it however many times you want it. I don't feel like going through the effort of limiting it.
That for me. But yeah, so that's the first one. The second Story of Midgate is also out. It came out last November, and it's called Mermaiden. So yes, there are mermaids in my world, because there's water magic, and there are people that have water magic in their blood. So there's tons of mermaids. One of the side characters is a mermaid. And she also, of course, has a terribly traumatic backstory, because it's epic fantasy. And what else would we do to them? Kill everyone.
Why can't mermaids have happy backstories?
I'm sorry. All I can give you is maybe a happy future. And I'm not even going to promise that, because my stuff is pretty dark. So it is also an in-between story. I recommend reading it between Liberation and Sundering, because during Liberation, you're reading it and you're kind of getting to know her, and you're like, I need to understand this. Like, what happened? What happened to you? And then you can read the backstory and be like, oh, okay. And then you can go into Sundering and start understanding more of what she is and what she's capable of, and why she is the way she is. The third Story of Midgate is called Desert Rose. And that one is actually coming out later this summer, first on Kickstarter. It is a very art heavy project. And so the Kickstarter is going to be all oriented around making it absolutely beautiful, with tons of interior illustrations and beautiful cover, and hopefully fancy up the rest of the book, you know, get some foiling and some extra fancy stuff on the hardcover version. And then that one won't post to retailers until around Christmas time.
Oh, okay. So that's okay. Because mine is, I'm writing a Kickstarter. It's probably gonna be June. I really wanted it for May, but characters, the book, nothing is cooperating for May. The book's not. The third book's not finished. I decided to launch a whole trilogy. The first 2 books are finished. The third book is, the characters really don't want to end the story, so they're like fighting me. So I'm like. So I feel like I'm stringing people along, and I'm like, it's not my fault. They don't want to end it, even though
I can't control what they do.
No, I can't. Even though, like, I only write stories about this one fantasy world, this one time period in it. So they could show up in another book. This doesn't have to be the end of that. But they are fighting me like it is the end of them, and I'm like, you can just show up in the next book. I mean, in another book, in another series, they all take place the same country at the same time.
Yeah, speaking of characters not doing what you think that they should do, you know, and they're just not, they don't behave well. The stories of Midgate were all novellas, or at least intended to be novellas. So they're about 25,000 to 30,000 words, and it, you know, it's like a nice like 3-hour read, and a nice self-contained story. Those are just single point of view. And then I got to working on Desert Rose, which is a fantasy romance, and it just didn't follow the rules that I set. And suddenly it became, I think it ended up being like a 58,000 word novel, a full length novel with dual point of view, because you got to have both sides, really. The more I wrote, I was like, oh yeah, we have to have both perspectives on this. And it just kind of grew. And I had my story outline, you know, so I knew exactly which beats I wanted to hit and what scenes I wanted to include. And as I was writing it, just turned out to be a lot more content per scene and per chapter than I had initially thought it would be. And I think it's exactly what it needs to be now. And I'm glad I didn't cram it into a shorter book, because I don't think you would have gotten the quality of the development of the romance and the depth of how difficult some of their decisions were. And, you know, if I had cut a lot of stuff out. So that one is actually going to be over twice as long as the other stories of Midgate. And the fourth one, when I eventually get to it, that one might be, I guess I don't know. I don't know what that one's going to end up being, shorter or longer. It won't be a huge fat book, I can tell you that. But that one's going to be assassin backstory. So it'll be super, super fun.
It'll be what it needs to be.
It will be what it needs to be, yes.
So coming back to Sundering, which is book 2, do you want to read an excerpt? Do you want to talk a bit more about what happens in it? Or do you want to not give away tons of spoilers?
I can read an excerpt. I was torn amongst 3 different options here. So
I mean, you can read all 3. I mean, I love listening to
They might be a little too long. I don't know. I was thinking,
let it be on the record that the offer was there.
How long is your podcast again?
I mean, they range anywhere from 1 hour to 2 hours. Like, it all depends on like how much the guest wants to talk about.
We could hit more than one if you end up thinking that you know, we could get a different perspective on some of the writing. I think it's
up to you.
Each of the 3 is a different scene, you know, like a different tone, a different situation. And somebody that just reviewed it, actually, they commented that this is dark and gritty fantasy, but it has tender moments. And I was like, oh, that's like such a nice thing to say, because, you know, that's kind of what I was going for, and that's what I think I'm writing. I don't think I write grim dark in the sense that I'm very, very character oriented, and I have some romance. I have some, you know, romantic subplot, and I have feeling, and I have very strong character arcs, such that
Grimdark has that. Grimdark has
Yeah,
that.
some of
The
it
only
does.
difference between Grimdark and like Noble Bright, which is what I write, Noble Bright, is that in Grimdark, it's often they're powerless to change things in their world, and sometimes they have no hope because they
Yeah.
can't change things. Sometimes they still
And
have
I would
hope, but
say
the
I'm not
situation
right
is so
there.
against them. But in Noble Bright, which is what I write, there is always hope. You can change things. You may not know it. You may have to go on an adventure, kill some dragons, and then find, oh, okay, I can actually affect change in this world.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the difference. Romance does not have anything, and they're both very can be very character driven. They can both have romance. That's really the distinction, is that can you change the world? Do you have hope? You're on one side.
I am smack dab in the middle of those two things.
If you're dark and gritty, you're over more towards the grimdark line.
I'm definitely more towards grimdark, but I would not say that there is no hope. So that's kind of what I would draw the line is like, I'm not quite to that point. I think that there is hope and light somewhere in this world. And there are these tender moments where you really see the soft side of someone, or you see them being vulnerable to somebody else after really fighting hard to be able to get to that moment. But there is a lot of darkness before that and around it, and they're just these little candles in the darkness fighting against a world that is just consumed with madness and jealousy and possessiveness and people clamoring for power. And I think, I don't know if that's what people like, then that's what I got. I think all of my stories kind of have that feel to them. They're kind of dark. They're kind of thematically serious, but they have moments of light that kind of make you hope that there's a better future.
No, and that's awesome. And grimdark there is like the lighter side of grimdark, and that sounds like where you're at. Like,
okay, well, I can read.
You're going to read Sundering, or okay.
Sundering.
Yes. Okay.
I'll read one of these scenes. Should I introduce the characters before I go into this, or?
I mean, it's up to you. If you think that if you think that listeners need that background to understand the scene, then yes. If you don't think so, then we could read the scene and then you could give us your explanation. Like, it's up to you, like which way you think would enhance the experience. Because authors who've come on have done it both ways, for depending on what they decided beforehand, if it needed something or if they wanted to talk about it afterwards, which we are totally going to talk about it afterwards. Anyways, so up to you. The floor is yours.
Sounds good. All right. So I'm going to read an excerpt from Sundering, Book 2 of The Keepers of Midgate. And happy to answer any questions that come from this or just talk about the themes of it. But I guess the main things to know going into this are that one of the major characters, her name is Lyra. If you can see my background, that's her. She's an air mage, and she is attending temple training to learn how to utilize her magic better. She is also learning how to control gates, which I'm sure you will have questions about, with an elderly mage named Mother Malloraine, and one of her best friends is named Bianca. So with that, I will begin. Without a glance back at the dungeon, Lyra stepped through, leaving her eldritch chained to the wall. Mother Malloraine's apartment had been cleaned. The bowls of food had been removed, stacks of books organized and shelved, and the mirror shined. The stained glass window was latched against the winter outside, and the pile of blankets had been neatly folded and stacked in large baskets. Nevertheless, the stale scent of the elderly woman and her medicinal teas lingered. Lyra took a deep breath of it. It reminded her of her aunties. For a flighty moment, Lyra wanted to open the window and smell the fresh air, as Malloraine had so often had her do. Then she remembered her ethereal form. She was looking for Bianca. Bianca was hurt. Redirecting her mind, Lyra passed through the door and moved quickly through the abbey, up the stairs to Bianca's room. There she lay, pale as a sheet of paper on her bed, with linen wrapping her abdomen. Her clothes and hair were filthy, and her face showed signs of having been smeared too quickly with a mucky cloth. She appeared to be sleeping, but her breath was shallow and her chest barely moved. Lyra quickly moved to her side and touched her with a ghostly hand. "Oh, Bee, I'm so sorry," she said. But Bianca couldn't hear her. 2 mages entered, oblivious to Lyra's spiritual presence. "She's lost too much blood. Even I can't help her," said one. "We need a transfusion, but no one here has that kind of transmutative magicka." The other pulled back the covers, revealing Bianca's crumpled legs. "I can't wait much longer to amputate, Porta." Porta, the first mage, sighed. "I know, but she could neither handle the blood loss nor the anesthesia. She would never awaken, just slip deeper until her heart stopped." The second mage, a medical specialist named Dariana, stared at Bianca's legs a minute longer and shook her head. "Perhaps if we had someone with greater destruction gifts, we could avoid a manual surgery and seal it shut with Father Maricus's assistance." "The shock may still be too much," said Porta, throwing her hands in the air. "We need a transfusion before we even attempt it." "Is she still bleeding?" asked Dariana. "No, Maricus cauterized as much as he could from the knife wounds, but she had already lost so much by the time we found her. And cauterized or not, her organs are severely damaged. That apprentice I had a number of years ago, Grayson, he had transmutative water magicka," said Dariana. "I assigned him with that hemophiliac baron in the Sukrat Valley. Perhaps a dragon keeper could reach him in time." Lyra tried to follow their conversation, but it was difficult to listen in such a flighty form. The mention of dragons piqued her attention. "Even a dragon may take too long," Porta lamented, "but it's worth a try. Are there any keepers in the city right now?" Dariana threw her hands up in despair. "There may be 1 or 2. You know they never come into the city for long." She delicately replaced the covers over Bianca's legs. Porta prayed quickly over the unconscious woman, leaving a heartfelt blessing and a sad smile. Then both mages left with purposeful steps. A dragon keeper, Lyra wondered. They were strange people, and their charges were awe-inspiring. Air dragon keepers patrolled the lonely tall grass between the Sukrat Mountains and the eastern coast. Mam had always accorded them respect and suggested they hindered bandits. Occasionally, the wayfarers would trade with one, and they always struck Lyra as hermits. It wasn't healthy to live alone, thought Lyra. One always needed their caravan. The quirky dragon keepers would land far off to avoid scaring the horses and hall beasts, then approach cautiously on foot. The air dragons, magnificent creatures with scales the color of the summer sky, didn't frighten Lyra, but did exude an energy so intense it almost made her nauseous. She had always been grateful they landed further away, if only because she couldn't stomach their proximity. Her brother Eldon had said the same thing. She realized her spirit was wandering again, losing focus. Bianca. She returned to the bed from which she had drifted. Bianca was still unconscious, so Lyra placed her ethereal hand on Bee's and sat on the bedside stool. She stayed that way for several bells, until she could feel her energy waning. She had to return to her eldritch, or she would simply fade away. Was it such a bad thing to die? The next life could be wonderful. Lyra's mind wandered to the green lands, and she imagined running through the meadows with her brother Eldon, her layered skirt flashing with color as she bound and spun, bells and tambourine tinkling in a merry dance, and Mam with a tender smile as she held her tiny grandson wrapped in a rainbow of soft textiles. She imagined holding Konan again, her cheek buried against his scarred chest and tickled by his fine hair, inhaling his presence as a spring thunderstorm flashed around them. "Murder is a damnable sin," came Maricus's authoritative voice in her memory. "Only Ia can forgive you." Lyra was yanked from her fantasy as violently as if she had physical form. She would not find the Greenlands when that next gate opened. No. Instead, she would pass to a lower dimension, another gate for her transgressions. The man in the mine, the warden, the innocent Haralal, the 2 attackers in the cabin of the ship, the crew and passengers of the Nessa, Mika, Thordran, Konan, Nullimer, and Bianca. Even in her ethereal form, Lyra could feel the coldness of Bee's fingers, the listlessness of her body. A pulse barely flickered on her wrist, and all color had drained from her plump cheeks. Her forehead, so often creased from the stress of meeting with Nullimer, had smoothed, and her light brown brow relaxed as though she were only sleeping. Matching curls, larger and looser than Lyra's, framed Bee's filthy face and stuck to one muddy cheek. This is my fault, she thought. I didn't save her. Despairing, Lyra wept for her friend and for herself. The possibility of joining those she loved waned away, shriveling the last of her optimism. Death was no hope. It was a terror and an eternal separation. She had to return to her eldritch before her spirit faded out. Or do what Zoan did. The thought resounded in her mind in Riven's callous tone. Weak from tears and overextension, Lyra nestled her forehead against Bianca's, thinking at first to say farewell. Then, instead, she allowed herself to sink in. That's the end of a scene. And I could keep going to see what happens next.
I'm never ready for it to end. There's always that awkward, like, wait, that's it? Oh, I need to unmute.
It was bright in Bianca's mind. I could keep going.
That's totally up to you. I'm an audiobook addict, so I never say no to more authors reading or narrators narrating. So I'm not the person to ask if you just listeners know I am not that person. I say yes to all excerpts, no matter their length.
There are 5 more pages in this chapter.
Totally up to you. No pressure.
I'll keep going. If you like audiobooks, then I'll go. Okay. It was bright in Bianca's mind. Lyra felt her energy return as she rested in the unconscious woman's form. Bee, she called out to the void. Is it really you? Bianca appeared beside her, standing on an invisible, infinite surface. She looked healthy. They embraced in a sea of tears. Are we dead? Bee asked, her voice muffled by Lyra's long, thick hair. Lyra tightened her hold. No, but you were badly injured. Bee hugged her for minutes before letting go. I can't feel a thing. I've just been floating, kind of lost. She looked around at the bright void with wonder. I dream a lot, then wake up, but still in this place. It's your mind, Bee, Lyra stuttered, unsure how to explain what she had done. I hope it's okay that I joined my spirit to yours. I didn't want to leave you. I couldn't leave you. Bianca beamed. I don't want you to leave. Then her smile saddened. You said I'm injured. Yes, Nullimer got you with my... Lyra couldn't finish, as the reality once again overwhelmed her. He had thrown her own knives back at them. And your legs were crushed by rocks. They said they needed to amputate them. Bee wrinkled her nose. Do you think I'll survive? Lyra didn't know, but she explained that they were seeking a healing mage with the help of a dragon keeper. Even from her, the plan sounded desperate and unrealistic. Bee patted her hand. It's probably better that I'm not awake, she murmured. They were quiet for a while. Finally, Bianca spoke again. Is Nullimer dead? Yes. Bianca's lip trembled, and her eyelashes twitched. Praise Ea, she whispered. Lyra held Bianca close as she released all of the emotions she had pent up. Her tears, Lyra knew, were not sad or fearful, but cathartic. When she finally wiped her red eyes, she gave Lyra a rueful smile. Praise the light, she repeated. How long, Bee? How long did you have to? Lyra asked. Bee sniffled again. Since I arrived and couldn't access my magic. After a few failed lessons, he sought me out. He said if I didn't please him, he would send me away. Lyra nodded. She understood, and she hated Nullimer even more than she knew was possible. Despite her doubts, a conviction began to grow within. They had been in the right to smite the man down. It was the only way to protect Bee, to cleanse awful things from the middle gate. For Bee's sake, she would never regret what she had done. No matter how hard I worked, it wasn't enough, Bianca continued. Whenever my failure made my apprenticeship questionable, I had to do what he told me, to stay. How did you survive? Lyra didn't expect an answer, and Bee didn't give one at first. But Lyra knew she herself would not have endured. She was too weak, too soft, too delicate, just as Thordrin had told her. Bee had a resilience she couldn't imagine. But then Bianca did answer, slowly and thoughtfully. For a long time, I shut myself off. I tried hard to stop feeling anything, to compartmentalize my mind from my body's experience. No joy, no laughter, no anger, no fear, and no pain. You can't hurt if you can't feel anything. It was like watching someone else live your life, and all the colors were gray and dull. I focused all my energy on studying, and every time I was punished, I studied harder to avoid being punished again. And then I saw you. Bianca gave her a bashful smile and leaned her cheek against Lyra's shoulder. You were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, even prettier than Queen Jonah or her sister Jasa, rest her soul. She reached up and brushed Lyra's hair behind her ear, then trailed her fingers down the curled ends. That reddish tint with blonde, highlighted from summers in the sunshine. You really have marvelous hair. Lyra blushed, and Bianca laughed at herself. And your eyes. Bianca shook her head. And the way you carry yourself, so confident and powerful, and willing to stand up when you see someone mistreated, yet soft and kind, and humble enough to take reading lessons from someone like me. I think I loved you from the moment I met you, and I couldn't compartmentalize it anymore. I wanted to feel what you made me feel. After that, I survived Nellimer's abuse by thinking of love. I accessed the earth magic by allowing myself to feel for you. All that passion, that heart was what was missing before. She straightened and grasped both of Lyra's hands with an affectionate squeeze. I have you to thank for helping me survive. But I can't save you now. What if you don't wake up? Bianca shrugged, still holding her hands. It's all right now. I feel somehow at ease knowing Nellimer is dead. And I'm here with you, the only person who matters to me. She looked around the bright void and smiled vacantly. I really do feel all right. Perhaps it's just this place. It's very peaceful, separate from the chaos of the world, separate from the suffering and the horror. It's almost hard for me to recall everything that happened after you showed up. I'm not sure how long I've been here, wandering and dreaming, but it seems all right. Will you stay with me till the end? Lyra blinked away tears and promised she would. Till the light becomes darkness, Bee. They talked and laughed, sharing stories of Tellini and Godric in childhood. When Bianca was young, she had fallen from a horse and bore a scar on her shin. Lyra showed her a wide swath of scar on her thigh, where she had scraped against the wood of the wagon as she tumbled in her own accident. They spoke of the ocean and how it differed from Lidis to Marlamet, and Lyra described how the grasslands changed from lush, semi-tropical growth at Tamarine to the wispy shortgrass of the Mesic flatlands near Aklim. Lyra suddenly realized she was giving too much away, revealing her wayfarer roots. But Bianca didn't seem surprised at all. She simply accepted the information with a knowing smile. Although Bee's mind was white, with no ground or sky, infinite in every direction, they walked. Hand in hand, they wandered through their memories together. Then Bianca stretched and yawned. Pardon me, I'm not bored. I'm just very tired. Lyra wasn't tired at all. In fact, she felt fully recovered from being away from her eldritch. She supposed her gate to Mallory's room had collapsed by now, and didn't really care. Bianca yawned again, covering her mouth, and then shifted into a giggle. Yes, I am exhausted. She blinked slowly and rubbed her eyes. A portal flashed into being, and the rich flavor of the upper gate beckoned. Oh, I can see it, Bianca said in surprise. Is that a gate? Lyra took in a quivering breath, and she smiled through suddenly blurred vision. Yes, It is. Bianca's hand slipped from hers as the woman approached the gate with wonder. It's amazing. Come with me and look. She turned and grabbed Lyra's hand again, tugging enthusiastically. I can't, Bee, Lyra stammered. She fumbled for the right words. It's not my time, and I'm not yet worthy. She knew it was true. Although she didn't regret saving Bee, she knew Father Marcus's judgment was correct. She could not go to the Greenlands yet. Bianca's grin faltered. You mean... Are you sure you can't come with me? Maybe we're meant to be together in the next life. Not like that, I know, but together, till the light becomes dark. Bianca started to cry too. Please come with me. Lyra gave her hand one more affectionate squeeze and let it go. I can't. But someday we'll see each other again, by the will of Ia. She tried to sound encouraging, and Bianca seemed to believe it. Until then, I'll love you forever, said Bee, wiping her tears. Remember, your love saved me. Your friendship saved me. Not hate or anger or fear. Love. I love you too, Bee. Lyra's voice, though it was barely a whisper, cracked, and she sucked a breath in. She clutched her pounding chest as she let it out through clenched teeth, as though she could quiet her heart's wild drumming. Her best friend stepped through the gate, materializing on the other side with renewed form. As she turned to wave, the gate dissolved into nothing, and the green world disappeared. So that's the end of that.
Oh, wow. I'm never ready for it. I was like, wait. I did. I love all books. I'm really hard to, I'm one of those, I like everything. I'm hard to, there's very few books that I actively dislike. But those books that I dislike, I really, really dislike. And they're not bad books.
Traditional epic fantasy. Like, that's what I love. I love to write it.
Me
I
too.
love to read it. I read some other stuff, but by far that's my favorite.
I love it too. I've been not reading it for the last couple of months just to not give my characters more ideas to disobey me, and in the hopes that they'll like follow the darn plot. So, but I'm missing it. So, this was a real treat for me. So let's talk about characters.
Yes.
Since we just heard them in their own voice. So we've got Lyra. Am I saying it right? I'm never sure like what character names. Lyra. I'm always like, how do you pronounce? That's the beauty of audiobooks, because like however the narrator pronounces it, I'm like, okay,
like, that's how it's gonna be forever now.
Hopefully they checked with the author on that. I'm gonna assume that's correct.
Yeah.
So Lyra. So all right, so she's got air magic from what we were hearing in there.
Really,
so how does the magic system work? Yeah.
But she also has what's called gatekeeping abilities. And so that's where that came into this scene too. So she can manipulate air, but she can also open portals. And a lot of this second book has magic learning pieces of it. Like, it's not like academy genre per se, but you know, the first book, they don't even really know the potency and the extent of what they could really do. And they discover a lot more in the second book. And so that's something that she's kind of learning as she goes, and ends up being, you know, really, really important. So, so she has two types of magic.
Yeah. So in your magic system, do you have like in mine I have distinctions between gates, between portals. They all mean different things, and it's very precise about like what they mean, and it's like a you know, like one of them is just a doorway and you can only cast it between Like there's a specific distance that you can do this with, and other than and then we've got a gateway, which is like a magical tunnel that you can bore through other realms to connect things that are very far apart. Like I'm just wondering in your, because I heard you using portals and gate interchangeably. Are they the same thing, or do you have like levels, or like am I just the only nutcase author out there who was like, I'm gonna make it complicated, this magical moving about?
I mean, you might be a nutcase. I think most of us are, but I definitely use them more interchangeably. I don't have separate types of gatekeeper magic necessarily, but your ability to maintain a gate and to stay through it in your ethereal form is definitely a matter of both training and talent. And so, like, I don't know if you noticed in that first part of the scene, she's kind of scatterbrained.
Yeah.
And she gets very distracted. Well, when you're in your spiritual form, you get really flighty and impulsive and lost. So it's really easy to get lost on the other side.
Because you're not grounded by your body.
Because you're not grounded by your body.
Yeah. Okay, I got that.
They have to learn and to control, or they'll end up getting lost on the other side and they'll never come back.
So their whole physical being is not crossing. Okay. In mind, you are physically moving from one place to another.
Nope. So that's one type of magic. The majority of the magic system, though, I have what I call the low magics and the high magics. The low magics are usually more accessible to pretty much everyone. You could have a particular talent in them, but almost anyone can do them. And so those are things like herbal magic, which is green magic. Black magic is metal magic, and potion making and making blessings and making curses, and like a love potion. So and Lyra actually knows a lot of that stuff because her caravan of wayfarers used those as something that they could sell on the road, and so she knows how to make some of that stuff, and she knows a lot about medicine. The higher magics are the elemental magics. And so there are 5 elements in this world: fire, water, earth, air, and sun. And so sun is kind of like electricity. So there are peoples with that type of magic in their blood. And so that's where you get things like mermaids. And then there are people like Lyra who can manipulate the elements. And then, so there are a couple different levels of ability to interact with an element. Manipulation is the most common and the most basic and the most accessible to more people. But she is like really powerful in her ability to do those things. The second level is called transmutation, and that's where you can shift one type of matter to another type of matter based on your powerful element. So very, very few people can transmute anything, but there are some people out there that can. And then the third level is creation, like true creation, building something from nothing. And based on their religion, only their God can truly create something. Everything else is building from pieces that already exist. So
that's kind cool.
Of magic structure.
Yeah, no, I'm always interested in that. How other authors set up their magic and how that comes through in the story. Like how, I'm always like very interested in that. Okay, so Lyra's got the air magic and the gate keeping. And you didn't mention the gatekeeping. Where does that fall in? Is it with the elemental? Is it
it's a whole separate type of magic. It's very, very rare. Very few people really know, like a lot of like the commoners don't even necessarily realize that it exists. The world is called Midgate, and it is really short for the middle gate. So interpret that as you will. Well, if there's a middle, then what else is out there? And you learn a lot more about at least the temple's theory of that in Sundering. So you learn more about gatekeeping.
That's really cool. and that in yours it's a separate magic. In mine, it's a skill. Anybody you can there's certain magics that are more suited to it.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure you could build it with like any type of magic if you know what you're doing. It's just easier with other types of magic, and depending on whether you're trying to do a simple portal or a like magical tunnel, which is what the gateways are in my world, that's much more of a skill, and you usually need multiple mages helping you with that. It's like you need to be at one at each end, building it to, together, towards the middle, and hoping that you don't pass out. It's not even, it's hard even for like, for humans, it's difficult for some of the magical creatures thing. Even for them, it's like risking their like existence to do something like this, because it's such a drain, and keeping it open for any length of time is, I mean, unless you're an angel, you probably can't sustain that for very long.
In my world, if you want to get somewhere fast, you kind of have to just get a dragon.
Well, there's that too.
And I don't know if you kind of picked up on that, but the dragon keepers they're kind of separate from a lot of the rest of society, and they're sort of set apart, and it's almost like there's a respect, but there's also maybe not, it's kind of like they just don't belong. And so they don't
jealousy, because like the dragons could also eat you, so I get the respect.
So people are definitely afraid of them, because they are this huge, amazing predator, and there are dragons associated with each element as well, and they're all different from each other. So not all of them are fire dragons.
They're not in my world either. I didn't know that. They have decided to inform me that they wrote me a very angry letter and let me know that they're types of dragons.
Right. I think one of my favorite things though is books that have sentient dragons, because and I don't care if they're like violent sentient dragons. Right. That's totally fine with me. But having them be actual characters where they have a little bit of personality, and
or a lot.
A hair snarky even. I love books that
and their own goals. Like in mine, the dragons are their own creatures, their own people, their own. They have their own goals that do not necessarily coincide with what the characters want from them.
Exactly.
Or the plot. Sometimes they're like, nah, I don't really want to be involved in this. You have fun.
So in my world, again, kind of going back to their religious lore, they believe that when the world was first made, that dragons were made from the head of their god, and humans were made from the heart. And so they're meant to be together, but they also complement each other in different ways. So dragons don't really act like people. Like they have this kind of own really interesting array of personalities and ways of treating situations. And they're like, they totally lack empathy. It's my favorite thing. They just they just don't have it. And they're very, very logical. So I like writing the dragons. I think they're kind of funny sometimes without meaning to be.
That's cool. So let's talk about the religion real quick. So if the head is the dragons, they think the head is the dragon and the heart was the humans. What sprang from the other body parts? Because they're got hands and feet and legs and arms and hair.
That's a good question. I haven't really thought about that part of it yet, but they definitely believe that the world as a whole is composed of those 5 elements, and they kind of view the sun as the primary, most important element that is most closely linked to their god. And so they also consider like the actual sun, when it's going through the sky, that's their god watching them. That's the eye. So
I see.
So yeah, I don't know about the rest of the body parts, but there's an eye for sure, and there's a brain, and there's a heart. A lot of personification of their understanding of their god, but also because there's so much magic ingrained in their society and integrated with different people's blood and making these distinct races of people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of it is really interconnected, and so many of them share very good strong facets of the religion, and there is a main like temple through a lot of the main society, but even these other peoples that live outside of that main society also seem like they kind of follow similar things, but then based on their lifestyle and their environment, they might hold up one element to be more important than the others. And that might be at odds with what the main temple teaches. And so there's some variation in religion. And there's a very powerful temple that does all of the teaching and training of mages. And so they revolve around their 5 elements.
And so the one that does the teaching, is that the High Temple where Lyra went, or is it another temple?
Yeah, the High Temple is like the main temple for that kingdom, but there are temples in every major town. So the High Temple is the one in the capital.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
And so I in your book's blurb, I saw that there was like mindless violence spreading through the kingdoms. So
Mm-hmm.
like what is that? And like what, maybe we can talk a little bit about like the political situation. Like, so you've got
Yeah.
multiple kingdoms, like what's going on there? Because I'm sure that has an effect on Lyra,
Yeah.
and maybe
So
directly or indirectly.
there is a lot going on, especially in this second book. A lot of the plot threads in the first book crash together and really, things start happening. So the first book, you'll get through a lot of it thinking, I don't quite see how these stories are going to come together just yet. And then you get to Sundering and you're like, whoa, okay, things are really, really, really they're twisting tight as a braid. And one of the things that is bringing them together is what's called the madness. And so it starts during the first book that there's just this really strange violence that is starting to happen. And it's kind of spreading from this one island nation that has a really busy port. And so at first they're just like, it's a port, it's full of disease. Who knows what's going on over in that kingdom, But then it turns to more and more serious things. We're like, hey, our messenger birds aren't coming back. And there's been some weird stuff happening. And there's outbreaks of violence in the streets and cannibals and just people wantonly murdering, and there's animals reacting to people and killing them for some strange reason, and we can't really figure out what's going on. And so a lot of that story really starts coming together in Sundering as they start to investigate it and try to figure out how to heal it, if it's even possible to heal.
Oh wow. And you said that there's multiple kingdoms.
Yes. Yeah. So she is in one kingdom that has they have a pretty busy port, but it's not the island nation that I was talking about. So they're kind of looking out for it and trying to figure out how to stop it, how to slow it down. It seems like it's coming from this other place that's one of their trade partners is this other kingdom. And that is where one of the other main characters actually is heading, because he's trying to save his ports. His ports are starting to get sick too. And so he's heading directly there. He's intends to use his magic to figure out a way to heal it. And so he kind of dives headlong into figuring out the mystery of it and seeing if he can change it. And so he's kind of on this fact-finding mission at first and ends up going to one of the Mer kingdoms as well to try and find more answers and get more powerful in his water magic.
And that's Reylin?
Yes. Yeah.
And So is this multi-point of view, the book, or
Yes.
are we okay? So we're
Yep.
not just in Lyra. And then I saw in your blurb there's a shipwrecked Konan.
Yep. Yeah. So Conan is another main character. You can see him on the cover of the first book, Liberation. He also is kind of has his own mission. I don't want to give too much away, but he is also trying to get back to that kingdom, that same kingdom that Reylin is from, and pursue his own goals. And so he also is trying to figure out what's best for the people that he cares about, and when and how should he intervene, and how can he use his strengths to try and fix the madness and try and protect the people that he loves.
Oh wow! Do the characters interact at all, like Lyra, Reylin, and Konan, or are they just off on their own things that?
Yes, they do. They do a lot, I should say. So I kind of mentioned like Liberation, they start less intertwined. Now, obviously, Lyra and Conan are together on this book cover. So yes, they're together in this book. But all of the other things going on across all those kingdoms, yeah, I have several different points of view to tell these stories of all these characters that are eventually going to completely collide. And so in Sundering, that's really where you see them intermixing, and their stories really start complementing each other, and you're starting to see the picture of how it all comes together. But I will also tell you, you're not going to see how all of it comes together until Schism.
I see. That's cool.
I really enjoy writing the different points of view, because I love how deep you can get into a character's head. And I do third person, multiple point of view. And so it's just great. Like you start a chapter with Lyra, and she's kind of shy, kind of self-effacing, kind of naive, trusting, empathetic, super sweet, right? And so it's the way that she talks and the way that she thinks about people and the way that she reacts to situations is one thing. And then you switch to a point of view from the assassin, and he's like the most caustic, foul-mouthed person ever. And I mean, you got to be in two different headspaces to write those points of view. And so a lot of times what I do is I will write one point of view all the way through until like I can't go any further, and write all their points of view chapters. And then I'll go back to the beginning and switch to another character and kind of like get my head into their space and go, okay, how do they talk? How do they react to things? Would they react to this thing with anger or with compassion or with patience? Or are they going to just start dropping F-bombs like certain individuals do? And it really just, it changes the entire tone of the chapter. And so then once I'm in that assassin headspace, well, I write all the chapters all the way through for him too. And so I have a lot of fun with that, because every character is so different. And like we talked about backstory a little bit, all of them are dealing with different things that have happened in their past that make them who they are. And they're all keeping different secrets, different things that they're ashamed of, or that they just don't want to admit to, or they haven't spoken aloud. And that affects what they say, even if that's not the thing that they say. And so I have a lot of fun with it. I think I added 2 points of view in Sundering that were not in the first book. So I have, in Liberation, I have Conan, Lyra, Reylin, Sarana, Tayuki. Yeah, 5. So I have 5 points of view in the first book, and then I add 2 more in the second.
You have 7 in the second one.
I do, yeah. Things start getting a little more complicated.
How many are in the third, which you've got 25%?
I think I think I'm, kind of at that point where you really want to dive deep into the people that you care most about. So the third one will strengthen those new 2 from Sundering and add more and more to those 2, because you're going to care about those. And it's going to cut back on certain other ones as it kind of becomes more clear that they're not the protagonist. Because as you go, you may not really be sure which way this is going to go. Who really is the one we're supposed to cheer for? Because a lot of them make some questionable decisions at some point. So by the third book, we got to pick sides, right? And so at that point, I scaled back the antagonist point of view a little bit more and focus more on the new characters that I think people will want to hear from a little more.
So who's the antagonist and what is their beef?
I'm not going to tell you.
Uh-oh.
I can't tell you. I really, because they would spoil it for people.
That's fair.
But I mean, I will say, like, a lot of them are very morally gray in different ways. Some of them are more impulsive than others. Some of them have anger management issues. And so none of them are perfect. A lot of them make pretty serious mistakes at one point or another. A lot of times, I mean, my goal is to try and help you understand how they got to that point so that you can actually empathize with, like, hey, I understand how they got there. I don't think that was the right decision, but I can see how they got there. And so throughout the books, you may not necessarily be siding really clearly with somebody or against them, except for probably one of them. I think everybody's going to hate one of them by the end of Sundering, and you should, because they make terrible, terrible, terrible choices. But for the most part, you can kind of see how they ended up on that path and then reacted a certain way. But none of them are perfect. So yeah, I can't tell you who the antagonist.
Yeah. Perfection would be boring anyways. We don't read to read about perfect characters. We read to read about imperfect characters and live vicariously through them, either because they're making choices we would absolutely never make, but we want to see what will happen if someone did actually make those decisions.
I would 100% try to ride a dragon. So yeah, I mean, I'd probably die, but
I would too. I would too. I have issues with heights and like some vertigo, so it would not. I would deeply regret my decision, but I would still do it.
There are water dragons. You can just swim in the ocean.
Well, there's that too. I love water, so
you're covered.
But I would still try the dragon riding through the sky, even though I would probably die.
Screaming the whole way.
Yeah, that better be one really strong harness. That's all I gotta say. Okay, so you mentioned their god. Is there just one, or okay? So there's not like a pantheon of.
It in the primary religion, yes, but like I mentioned, the different peoples that are. There's a whole history here, right? So the main society was once upon a time all controlled by the empire. And that's a prequel book. I'll tell you about that later. Give me a couple years and I'll write it. But so that whole region shares that same religion, but the societies that were not taken over by the empire have their own kind of unique take on their religions. So like the people of the desert that were never taken over by the empire, they worship what they call the Desert Mother. And there are a lot of parallels, but it's really, it's its own thing. And so some of the elemental things, they teach the same teachings, and then other ones they just totally discard because it's not relevant to their lifestyle. And, they believe that the land is shaped by these particular elements, and therefore, like, that's what their goddess controls. Likewise, the Mer people were never taken over by the empire. So they have kind of their own take on it. They have what they call water temples, and they hold up water as being the superior element, and they hold themselves up as being superior beings. So you kind of see that on all of the societies that were not taken over by the empire 1,000 years ago.
So the mermaids have their own origin story.
They all do. Yes.
So do they come from the feet? Is that why they have fins? They're being punished for coming from the feet.
So there are different fantasy races. They're human, they're demi-humans, I guess you could say. And the way that I describe it is that they have different elemental magic in their blood. So mermaids and their entire mer race, they have water element in their blood. And so that enables them to shift into their mer form and live underwater, and actually so they can all shift back and forth. So they can go to a two-legged form and they can go to a swimming form and breathe underwater. Likewise, there are people of air, people of earth, people of fire, and people of sun. And you meet a lot of them in this trilogy. You don't necessarily meet all of them, but as I continue to write other books in this world, you eventually will meet all of them.
Oh, okay. And like, how did there get to be humans who don't have magic in their blood and people who do have magic in their blood, which made them demi-human or more than human?
That's
I would say they're more than human. They've got extra
ancient history. So I mean, so I haven't fully developed really that part of the lore. I actually worked on that. But I will say that it is definitely like in the blood. It's hereditary. And so if you have somebody from the people of air, or I should say the mer, for example, if they mix with a human, they can. I mean, they look like humans when they're in their human form and they can reproduce with people, but the children are more likely to be weaker in that shifting magic. And so they have a really harsh policy in their culture that they do not mix. They maintain purity. And they go so far as to, kind of like the Spartans, they return inferior offspring to the current to ensure that they stay strong. So I mean, their culture is pretty harsh, and very, very oriented on, we are separate from these other people. We are superior. We have water in our blood. We were built to be the highest echelon of what our God created. So not all of the peoples have that perspective necessarily. So some, like the people of air, they can shift into a flying form, but they actually have intermixed a little bit more with people over the years. So some of their people can fly and some of them can't.
And that's got to be hard. That's got to be hard being like one of the people who can't fly.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing if only mom or dad had chosen somebody within their race, would be able to fly. Like, that's got to be rough.
Yeah, but their whole social structure is different than the mer, right? Like, so they have different societal roles depending on your skill sets. And so some people that can fly, well, they're more likely to be part of what they call the foragers. And that's kind of like their exploratory / military arm, but not necessarily, because they also have running birds that they can ride. And so some of their cavalry is ground cavalry, and some of their troops are flying. So they adapted as opposed to rejecting. And you learn a lot more about that actually in Schism. You'll learn more about their culture.
Oh, that's cool. So in book 1, in Liberation, which people with magic in their blood do we find out about in there?
The people of fire.
Okay, and then in Sundering, it's the people of water.
Mm-hmm. Well, you learn a lot about people of water in Liberation too, but yeah, you learn a lot more. A lot of the conflict for one of the major characters has to do with that conflict between cultures. So you learn about that kind of starting from the beginning. But the setting of Liberation, part of it at least, is in the desert where there are people of fire. And so you learn a lot more about who they are. And actually, I should also mention, you'll learn way, way, way more about them in my next upcoming book, Desert Rose, because that one is focused entirely on the people that live there as opposed to a story that just occurs in the desert. That one is focused in on that actual group of people. So
Oh,
Desert
wow.
Rose
Yeah.
is full of very unique culture that I think is really fun.
And that's coming soon.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to launch the Kickstarter for it, for the special illustrated edition, on June 17th. And then it will close on July 17th, which is my wedding anniversary.
Oh, congratulations. Wow. So we might be running them around the same time, because I mean, I'd like mine to run in May, but I'm not sure that's going to happen. June is probably more likely. So we have to end the book before I can run the Kickstarter. The book has to end.
Yeah, I'm mostly, the biggest thing I'm waiting for to launch. Well, I want it to line up on my anniversary, because I'm like terrible at expressing my emotions. And so I'm like, I write. If you want to hear my heartfelt feelings, I will write a letter, and I can do it that way. I'll write it. But otherwise I'm like terrible. Like I'm a horrible wife. So I was like,
no, you're not horrible. There's love languages. Yours is right.
Like, I set the date to be our anniversary because it's the only fantasy romance that I probably will ever write, and it's the sweet love story, and isn't that nice? And he was like, that's actually really nice.
Does he read your books? Is he a reader?
Yep, he's one of my primary alpha readers, critique people. So yeah, he reads the first version of all of my books and gives me feedback.
Does he? And how does that work? Does that cause any marital discord?
Occasionally. Apparently, I'm really bad at taking criticism.
Oh no! Or like, do you ever write anything that shocks him, and he's like looking at you differently?
Every day. Yes.
Oh wow.
No. Yes, but I think it's really fun for me to be able to have him read it, and I kind of follow along because I know where he's at based on comments that he makes. And then like when we're driving in the car, he'll bring up, here's one thing that's bothering me. I think I just don't see how this character could respond this way, and you need to explain better why they reacted that way, or change it, and that just seems out of character. So he'll point stuff out that he as a reader is kind of picking up on, and then I write all of that stuff down, and then I do like a full-on revision after usually after he and two other people that I have that I trust do a full read through, and then I'll do a full-on revision. And then after that, I have usually him and one of my other readers will read it again. They're absolutely amazing. They'll read multiple versions of my book. So, and I'll have them kind of check like, hey, did I fix everything? Do you feel good about this scene? Hey, this particular one was the hardest, I think, for me too. And I want to make sure this one's perfect. Can you make sure you focus on this chapter? And then they'll give me more feedback. And then at that point, I'm ready to release to a couple other reviewers that I also trust with early review.
Oh, wow. I'm jealous. I don't have any of that.
I'm
one of the few people who has read it before it goes out into the world.
It is not easy to find those people at all. It's really not. I mean, I'm super, super blessed that I have a partner that actually loves epic fantasy. So I'm writing exactly what he likes. And so that's super helpful. But I also have a couple people that I've met, like you know, through social media, through networking, that you end up finding that you have really similar interests or similar writing styles. And hey, it would work really well if maybe we exchange thoughts about this thing, or
I think
at least ideas off of. Yeah. And
I think we're a little further apart.
It's not easy. The one person that reads multiple versions over and over is a very, very hardcore fantasy reader. And so he has been absolutely amazing in bolstering me as I go through revisions of books. But yeah, almost no one else is really wants to do that, right? Like people want the
Yeah,
final, which
I
is
would
totally
love.
fair.
Yeah, I would love someone who would just want to read it, like, even if they just read it once and like we're open to like if I, little maybe a chapter or something that I redo or a section. That would be like amazing,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
I
And
haven't
I tend
quite
to
found
give them the
that.
whole chunk. Like I don't release pieces at a time usually. So like I don't have a Discord or anything. Some people are really successful with that. And I think my attention span is too short to host a channel.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so that's
I don't
not
have that
something that
either.
I've done. I focus on just getting it drafted. I mean, for a book this big, it literally takes me 11 months to draft. So
Oh wow.
I just focus on that, on producing the story and making sure that I'm already proud of what it is as it is. And then that editing process, or I should say like the beta review process, takes about 3 months to have them read it, give me feedback. I usually do some Zoom meetings with them just to talk through everything and make sure that
Wow.
it's
Yeah.
only a handful of people, but it's really amazing because they'll kind of get everything off their chest that they're thinking about. And
I'm
and I should
jealous.
also
That
mention,
sounds so cool.
I should also mention I also have a developmental editor. So she also is really great at providing that objective point of view. So after I go through my beta readers that first time and revise it, then I give her the revision. Because at that point, I'm like, I think this thing is pretty darn good. It's almost publication ready. I just need to make sure that from a totally objective viewpoint that you agree or disagree, or if there's still some weak spots in there. And so then the developmental editor, Emily Katzenberger, by the way, she's amazing. She gives me all of that kind of feedback. And she was amazing for Sundering and amazing for Desert Rose. So she's been doing that for me. And then I go through another round of revision, and then I'm ready to pretty much distribute to ARC readers.
Wow, that's quite the process. I am jealous.
It takes a while.
Yeah, I take about 10 to 12 weeks to write about 100,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
100,
Yeah. I mean, that
120,000
sounds
words.
about right. It takes a long time really to write. So of course, readers, if you're listening, when you bust through one of our books in 2 days and go, where's the next
Yeah.
one? And like, I'm working on it as fast as I can.
Yeah, like I can only write 4 chapters a week because I have a full-time job.
It's funny because it's like, oh my goodness, I am so happy that you blasted through that thing. You must have actually like really been engaged and you liked it and you couldn't put it down. I'm overjoyed, but also not quite done with the next one, so you got to slow down a little bit. But yeah, so I think I'm on a pretty good schedule, and I'm very regimented with my schedule. So I feel pretty confident that I'll finish my drafting on schedule. Schism will be done, drafted by hopefully November 30, and then I'll take December off, and then January I'll release it to my early beta readers. Hopefully by the end of March or end of April or so, I'll have all of the major revisions done. And I'll be hopefully looking at like a summer 2025 release for that third book. So that's kind of my goal and my schedule. And I've been aligning to that pretty well. Sundering followed that schedule perfectly.
Oh wow. That's wow. I have not figured out exactly. Well, what am I doing in 2025? I just want to finish this trilogy.
If you're writing, then it's all good,
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly.
That helps me because
I don't plan that far ahead.
They take so much effort, like they take so much brain power to make all your threads come together and make sure that all your characters enough stage time to help them grow and change and learn their lessons.
They've had too much. I think that's the problem.
They've had a couple unrequested lessons that they really didn't, want to learn, but there they go. But between the big books, that was when I kind of like took a mental break and wrote the novellas. Because it was kind of like after doing something good, my brain just wanted something easy for just a little bit, just to rest.
I know that feeling, but I've never been able to write a novella. I have like 5 books that were supposed to be novellas. They're all over 100,000 words. I don't know what happened.
Gotta break that habit.
I honestly don't know what happened. I only have a couple of books that are shorter.
Well, that happened with Desert Rose because it definitely ended up over twice as long as I thought it would be. But
sometimes when the characters get a hold of the plot, things change a lot. The plan deviates. There becomes a new plan.
But hey, like we were saying, it is what it needs to be. And those stories needed more time and more development and more depth and
more points of view.
Are simpler stories. They're very tight plots. There's only a single character point of view. You're following that character. Whereas this is interspersing at this point 7 different people that are going through things kind of together, interweaving, but kind of their own. They all have their own personal stories. So it's bigger. But the novellas, I found the shorter ones, at least, I can draft that in a month. And that is way easier of a bite to chew off than a whole huge epic fantasy novel. And so when my brain is just like, please just give me like an easy win, I'm like, okay, we'll stop and we'll write a novella, and then we'll have another really cool story of Midgate, and also I'll be recovered mentally to dive into that next epic book. So I've been kind of just one at a time alternating, and that seems like it's worked really well for my work pattern.
That's really neat. So after you've written the 4 novellas, well, one of them is not really a novella because it's 58,000 words, which is actually a short novel. But like, what are you going to do after that? After you finish trilogy and you start working on the follow-up, the sequel, are you going to also do novellas between those?
Yes, I have plans. I do, because so after I finish drafting Schism, which will be another big book, I will finish the last official story of Midgate, which is the assassin backstory. I think that will be either a novella or a short novel again. I was very much inspired by The Lies of Locke Lamora. I love how it's written to have what happened when he was younger and then what happened when he was a little older.
Oh my God. That book is so confusing.
Oh my goodness.
It's one of the few books on the short list of books Melinda really hates.
I love that book. Okay.
And I had to DNF it. I was so confused with the back. In the audiobook, it was just, I was so confused. Like, what's happening now?
There's no way I would follow it on audio because my auditory processing is really bad. So, like, I read the physical book. And even that, it was hard to follow at first. It took me probably like 40% before I suddenly like clicked and was like, oh my gosh, I totally love this book. Before that, I was kind of pushing through, like going like, I know that people say this is brilliant. I know that like, I really got to give this thing a fair shake and just
read almost to the end, and then I was like, I really don't care, so I stopped. I was like, definitely past the 75% mark. I've decided I'm never reading any of the sequels. I'm never finishing it. That's it.
No red seas over red skies for you.
Yeah. I thought the Malazan Book of the Fallen was confusing.
That one I haven't finished yet. I'm working on
it. I didn't either. I stopped after book 2 because like characters that I cared about from book 1 had completely disappeared, and was like, there was like, wait, what happened? Who are these people? Like, there's a few people from book 1, but I didn't. They weren't like people that I cared about. So like I ended up like not continuing after the Dead House Gates, which was book 2, because I was like, I don't care about these people.
that as far as like being a type of story where there isn't like one single main protagonist that you really follow their story all the way through. And some people are looking for that, right? Like they're kind of looking for that.
Oh yeah.
Omniscient,
it's just not for
you
me.
know, you can see the whole view of the whole world and all this stuff that's happening, and you don't necessarily bond to a single person. People are like, oh my goodness, Malazan's perfect for you. That's exactly what that is. My books are like very, very personal, you know, like
mine too. But when I was reading it, I didn't know that because I read Gardens of the Moon when it came out. I read Dead House Gates when it came out. I knew nothing else about it. This is like, I read this in like the early 2000s. Like there wasn't internet, but there wasn't a heck of a lot on the internet. They wasn't trying to sell you things.
There were a lot of cat videos.
Well, there was that too. But cat videos are not going to help you to know that he's writing this. And now there's all this stuff like talking about it that you can easily find. But back then, I had no idea. There was no note from the author. There was no explanation. I was just confused. And I was like, where did these other people go? Why are there people that I don't care about and have never met? Like, why is their story important? I didn't know that the way that he was doing it was specifically that, you know, that there was no main character, that it was different people, and he was that basically the overarching story that they were all part of is the main character and the world is the main. I didn't know any of that. So I found it like just hella confusing. And I was like, you know what? I'm not enjoying this. The writing is good, but I was like, I don't care about like any of these people. So I think
that's probably my biggest challenge with some of those books. Cause you're right. Like they're brilliantly written, but like I'm not deeply connected to any particular character. And
it's hard to connect to them the way it's written.
So, but yeah, so after I finish Schism, I will write the assassin's backstory somehow, some way, hopefully that you end up loving. I'm going to make sure you love it. And then after that, I will be ready for another bigger book. So I think I will either write the sequel to this trilogy, which I'm intending to just be one big book. Or I might write one of the early histories because I really, really would like to write about the Empire. I mention it as an aside in these books, and you don't really know much about it other than that there was at one time an empire that covered a large portion of both major continents, and that when they extended their power the most, was kind of this religious overreaching that ultimately led to their collapse. It led to, first of all, something called the Great Cleansing, and they even went after the Mer people, and they ended up going through a magic genocide. I want to tell that story. So that might be the next big novel that I do. And then after that big novel, I will write a sequel to Marked. Because even though he's not like the main character, his name is Davy. I love him and everybody else seems to love him too. And I really, really want to write more about him. So I want to write more short stories of him as he's growing up. And then I want to write a novella when he's just a little bit older and kind of like coming into adulthood. And it would be really sweet, and I have a great idea for it. So I'm definitely going to do that next novella after I finish the stories of Midgate. Actually, I guess it would be another story of Midgate. It just wouldn't be, well, they're not in chronological order anyways. They're actually released in the order I recommend reading them, because even though they occur, on a different part of the timeline, they give you essential backstory information just at the right time to start utilizing it in the main books. So I always say, read Marked, read Liberation, read Mermaiden, read Sundering, read Desert Rose, read Schism, read the Chronicles of Thordrin. And when you read that whole piece as a whole, you're going to understand so much more about the characters and why they did the things that they did. But if you didn't have the novellas, like you would still have the complete story. You just might not know this little secret of what happened when they were younger or something like that.
Oh, wow. So all of that is like 2026, 2027.
Yeah.
How far out do you have planned? Just curious.
Well, I mean, I also have a different prequel novel that's even further history back. They had the War of the Great Kings, and that was like thousands of years ago. So I could also write that story. So that'd be like 2028 probably when I would get to that.
Wow.
And
I have no idea what I'm doing in 2028. There'll be books. The characters haven't told me what we're doing in those books yet. I'm waiting for a memo.
I know which ideas I have, and I know that it takes me a year to produce a big book. So, I mean, just knowing how many stories I want to tell, I know that it's going to take me out to 2028 or so, just to finish that litany of ideas. And as I go, I always have more ideas, because it's like,
oh, of course,
this piece of their history, I mention it, but there's probably, there's like so much that happened back then. I really should tell that story. It'd be kind of neat. For example, I mean, the prequel novel of the Empire is going to have a love story. It's not a fantasy romance. That's not really like my main thing. Fantasy, Desert Rose is the only fantasy romance that I have, but there will be a romantic subplot in it. I'm going to focus on the Mer people again, because I think their culture and their world is really fascinating. But not only just because I think it's cool, but because of their water magic and their ability to live underwater, to flood their castles, to flood their cities. Like, they're more able to fight back because the Empire is more humans and more people that have to live on land. And so I want to kind of focus on their conflict and the romantic subplot that occurred as a result of the genocide, kind of bringing disparate peoples together. So,
oh wow,
yeah. So I know that will take me about a year to make.
That's cool. You're making me want to explore the undersea. I haven't done that yet. It's just roaming the enchanted forest.
I love just thinking of like, how would life be different if everything was in the ocean? Like, for example, they do have things that are basically like dogs. They're otters. If you lived underwater, you know that you would keep an otter as a pet. 100%.
Oh, of course.
It's like the perfect.
And a dolphin. The dolphin would be more like the cat that has its own personality and goes off and does its own thing, I imagine.
They ride whales and sharks for their cavalry. And the different animals have different personalities, right? Like, some people ride sharks, and that they're like very owner specific and you have to be a dominant rider in order to handle that. And new riders don't ride sharks. New riders have to start like on a black-headed whale, because they're more submissive and they're more kind of pod oriented, and they're gonna be a little easier on someone who's young, who's just learning how to ride.
And who's on the killer whales? Because killer whales hunt sharks.
Yes, so they do. They also have killer whales, and so again, that takes a certain level of control and control over your mount and just dominance to lead the school. And so their cavalry is typically divided by mount species, but also partly because they don't really intermix that well, but partly because they're good at different functions. So the shark cavalry will ride low, follow blood trails, kind of provide the vanguard for certain things. And then the killer whales will provide the main body center of the attack, and they're pretty intelligent. So, so they can do more complex strategy. It's just every single thing is different. I love thinking of like, how would this be different if you didn't have horses, or you look down on horses, because those are land animals. You're like, we're not going to use those if we don't have to.
Yeah. What are the horses of the sea?
Yeah. How would your weapons differ? How would your armor differ? I think the Mer people, especially, they have really cool clothing and social mores around appearance that are a result of the way that they shift their legs to fins. They expose their legs, and in a kind of pseudo medieval world, that's very, very atypical. And so they're wearing like armored skirting, kind of like Roman legionnaires, and cover their tops very thoroughly, and they don't believe in like showing any skin on their top. But they'll show their legs all day and nobody cares, because like that's just part of their lifestyle.
Well, yeah, you don't
like
you want to be able to shift without your clothing getting in the way.
Right. And so I think it's kind of funny because it comes up a few times, like people are just judging harshly because like the princess with her corset all lifted up and all everything showing, but her ankles are hidden, so it's okay, is standing there judging this other person whose ankles are showing. And you're just like, you guys are just racist. Can you just get over yourself and accept that not everyone does things exactly the way you do. Not everyone thinks the way that you do. And that's okay. So it's kind of funny the way that it comes up sometimes, but they do have vastly different cultural practices because of the way that they live and their environment.
Wow, that sounds so cool. Is there anything else you want to say about Sundering or any of the other things that we've been talking about? Because we've been going for like an hour. Oh, you were going to mention how like your work with the fisheries influenced the setting. We have to talk about that before we end.
Sure. Okay. And then I have a funny short thing to tell you after that.
Yes.
Okay. Well, so my day job is basically an ecologist of sorts. So I study nature. I study specifically aquatic nature in freshwater systems, and I conduct research on it. So I love nature, and so I love world building. I like building the maps and figuring out weather patterns and geological patterns. And I even think about like land drift and how did this mountain get here? And oh, well, that was, like however many million years ago, but this plate hit this plate and then it caused a gap over here. And then, so I get like way too into this, but I absolutely love building the world of Midgate, which is probably why I just keep writing stories in it, because I love this world.
Makes sense.
And I lean a lot, I think, on my professional education to help inform some of that world building. And so I like when things make sense. Like it drives me absolutely crazy when you have a world that is all quadrupeds. Every single animal has 4 limbs except for the dragons. And I'm like, that makes no evolutionary sense. How would this happen? That doesn't make it. Okay, I know it shouldn't bother me. It's fantasy. We can just make up our own rules all the time. But why would one 6-limbed creature emerge when then there's not a single other one out there? I just love authors like Anne McCaffrey, where she was trained in biology and she incorporated that very thoroughly into her science fantasy. And so I loved that she had like anatomical drawings of her dragons, and they made sense in her world, and the way that they developed made sense. And so I just adore kind of, she's like my hero. So I love incorporating all of that knowledge into what I do. And I also find sociology kind of interesting, and cultural, like how cultures develop and why they follow different paths of development.
Oh no, I think she.
Kind of what are the causative factors of how this happened. And so I like food. I like talking about food. I like talking about clothing and cultural rules, and how superstitions happened and how they developed and how trade routes occurred. So I'm just really just kind of a nerd.
No, that's awesome.
Let's finish with a very short story.
Sure.
It's the preface to Liberation. So this is like my personal note to all of you readers of how these stories came about. And I just like it because it makes me laugh, particularly the first sentence.
Oh, go for it.
This novel exists because my husband told me to give up. It's see, you're laughing. It's what I needed to hear. I have talked about writing this book for over 20 years. The world of Midgate blossomed into existence in early high school, a vast world with its own history, cultures, and peoples. I sketched maps and animals and plants. I jotted notes on color symbolism and language. I identified industries, located master training halls, and established an apprenticeship structure. I described religions and traditions and superstitions. I modeled wind and ocean currents, and then I determined climate patterns and resultant major biomes. I did everything but write. And the story just kept smoldering in my mind. At first, I thought it was about a man wrongfully kept from his crown, who overcame his circumstances and became the savior in a battle of good and evil. Then a girl appeared, and the story transformed. Then another man and woman appeared, shouting that they needed their fair share of attention, and my story exploded to an epic of people overcoming their past and freeing themselves from rigid destiny. Told through multiple points of view, this book is about freedom. Freedom from the bonds of societal expectations, suffocating control, and physical binds. The next, Sundering, is about choice, allowing the pain and madness of the world to mold you and drive you, or not. The last is about love, about who we are when we choose others over ourselves, or vice versa. And after hearing about it, day after day, year after year, for over a decade straight, and still having no book in his hand, my dearly beloved said, either start writing or admit that you're not going to do it and give up. That had exactly the effect it was meant to, and I buckled down to put my thoughts into tangible form. I spent a month documenting the plot and establishing point of view characters, then about a year drafting this book, and months upon months garnering feedback and revising. So here we are. I present to you Liberation, the first in series of an epic story about freedom, choice, and love, embedded in a magic-filled world of violence, madness, and loss. I hope you come to love the world of Midgate as much as I do, that your heart breaks and mends with the characters, and that you forget where you are for at least a little while.
Oh, I love that. I love the preface.
So
I think no, I love that, and I think like you're definitely not the only author who like was told, hey, either shit or get off the pot.
Exactly,
so to speak. You know,
and he knows like I don't give up on anything. Like I'm super,
me neither.
super stubborn. So the moment he said it, I was like. I'm going to go to my office right now. You just watch me.
And he's like, that's right. You do that.
Exactly. Like, well, that worked.
Now he gets a little bit of alone time in his man cave while you write.
A lot. Yeah. I had to change my lifestyle significantly to really get into writing seriously. I mean, I changed my entire schedule, changed my work schedule to try and take more Fridays off so that I can just write all day on Fridays. And yeah, and he doesn't see me nearly as much as he used to. So it really is a sacrifice to try and focus on producing this much writing and to make it, just an integral part of your daily life, if possible, life. And so, but I don't regret a thing because I asked him once, like, you really okay with this? Because I spend a lot of time writing now. And he's like, well, you've never been happier than when you started writing seriously. Like, I've never seen any other hobby make you, and it's not really a hobby, but you know what I mean? Like, I've never seen any other thing that you do make you as purely, completely happy as writing. So go write. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, no, that's love.
This is why I'm publishing a fantasy romance for you.
What did he say to that?
He just was, well, when I told him the dates, he was like, that's really nice. Wow. Like, I know it was nice. You're welcome.
Does he like fantasy romance?
I mean, well, I don't even know if I could claim that I like fantasy romance as a general rule. I like what I wrote.
Okay, and he likes what you wrote.
Yeah, but it's like definitely a darker theme, darker world. It's the same world as all my other books, so it's kind of gritty and it deals with serious themes and it's almost just a tragic story of, I should just say it's a Romeo and Juliet retelling, except, you know, they're not like 12. So,
Yeah. When I found out they were 12, I was like,
but in
this
terms of
takes
like
a lot away from the story.
the tragedy of it is what's so poetic, and it's so it's kind of based on that core idea of star-crossed lovers, and set in this world where there is just such violence and such racism and such division among peoples, and slavery, and just treatment of people as if they're not human. And so I love what I wrote for. I'm super, super excited for Desert Rose, that the artwork is going to be amazing. So I can't wait for that. But like, I don't read a lot of what you would typically call the fantasy romance, like the lighter, happier stuff. I just don't. I like epic fantasy, so that's basically what I read and what I write most of the time. So yeah, it's kind of funny.
No, I'm the same way. I don't read. I read epic fantasy. I love it, but if romance is if the plot is the romance,
right,
I'm not interested. If there's like the quest and, you know, all the other epic fantasy stuff, it, like, there's an actual story, we're doing things outside of the romance, and romance happens along the way, I think that's okay, as long as like it doesn't overshadow, like, as long as it's in the background, like it's something. It's maybe they'll get to it when it's over, you know, they're, you know, I'm fine with that. The more pining, you know, we can't quite get together until we fulfill the quest or whatever the story happens to be about, that I'm cool with. But if the relationship is the plot, no.
Yeah.
Not for me.
So I would say, so I'm kind of also writing those stories of Midgate to be like gateways into my world, because they are all standalone. So people who do love romance plots more will probably start with Desert Rose. And then if they're like, oh my goodness, I love this world, you know, then they can start back with the other books and dive into them. So it's kind of my idea. But yeah, the rest of my stuff is just is romantic subplot. So that one's kind of its own thing. And it's got a prettier cover, so you can kind of tell, hey, this one's like a little bit different. But hopefully you'll love it anyways.
That's awesome. Did you already start commissioning art for it?
Oh yeah. I just got the final illustration of the art today, actually. You want to see it?
Yeah.
See it for our sign off.
And then for those who are listening, once it comes up, describe it for us.
All right.
Use your words, author.
Use my words. I told you I can't talk. I can only write. So this one is more clearly marketed as a fantasy romance. So there is a couple on the cover. They are holding hands. They're dressed in this absolutely beautiful clothing in this desert setting. On my other side, there's kind of like a stripy camel-like creature called an Idraka, and so that's one of the fantasy animals that I have. And the words too, I could have put the words on here, but the typography of the title also kind of tells you this is more of a love story. And so I think it, you know, people will know what to expect when they say this is one of hopefully 18, if people can get me there on the Kickstarter, pieces of art that will be included in the project. And you can see, like, if you guys are looking at it, if you're listening, one of the characters has colorful skin. So he's not quite entirely human. There's something going on there. And so we were talking about people with different magics in their blood. Well, he's one of them. So as you can imagine, that's going to cause some conflict amongst different races of people, because they are not supposed to be together according to, you know, social rules. So it is definitely a star-crossed lovers story, and I think it's really beautiful, but it's also very gritty and serious, and it's faces a lot of the mores of what is a woman supposed to act like, and how are you supposed to treat other people who aren't like you? And I think those are really relevant themes to deal with right now. So and that wasn't on purpose. That just kind of happened. But I'm really, really proud of this book. So I can't wait until my Kickstarter opens up and you guys can see all of the other art that's coming.
Is it on pre-launch? Can you
It's
send
on
the pre-launch
yeah,
link?
so you can follow it. You can follow it right now, but you can't see any of the details yet.
Send me the link so I can put it in the description
Absolutely.
of the show notes so that people can click to follow. You can only see the main graphic and read a little bit about it, but you can't see the whole thing yet. But you can at least get like the flavor of it, get some idea of what's coming, and you can get notified. You can sign up to be notified when it launches so that you don't miss it.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. No, it's beautiful. And there's like this beautiful pink sunset behind them, which is very pretty. And what are those flowers? There's like purple-ish flowers.
Yeah. So the title is Desert Rose, and the setting is kind of inspired by the Thar Desert of northern India. And my artist actually like looked up, what is a desert rose? What does that look like? And it's actually a real species that is a sort of succulent desert plant with really hardy flowers and hardy like thick leaves. And that's exactly what it looks like. So
okay, they're beautiful.
So she incorporated that into the art. I'm like, you're amazing. You're like the most amazing person ever.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Yep. And she innovated the clothing again, kind of based on a combination of cultures in our world that live in more temperate deserts. So the Thar Desert, like I mentioned, a little bit intermixed with Mongolian traditional wear and intermixed with the Tuareg. So she used kind of all of those inspirations to guide what these people would look like. And they do live in a temperate desert, kind of on really fairly far north on their continent, but very, very dry.
What's a temperate desert?
So instead of being very, very arid all the time and really hot, it's actually located at a further northern latitude. So you get colder winter as well as kind of hot summers. It's still pretty dry, but the types of plants that you see and the weather conditions from summer to winter are different.
I see. Do they have like extreme heat and extreme cold, or they're...
Yeah, and maybe not extreme cold, but just you actually get winter. Yeah, you would get a winter.
Okay, so not like Mongolia. I saw a video recently.
Yeah, not quite that far north.
They get very hot and very cold in the winter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like right on the edge of that. But the mountains to the north, kind of like beyond those mountains to the north, would be more like Mongolia.
Oh wow. And so is it the elevation that caused it to be a desert and get not very little rainfall, or?
Mostly it's the barrier mountains that are around that part of the world that kind of keep major wind currents from bringing moisture in from the ocean, combined with the more northerly latitude of that particular land.
Oh, okay. That's very cool. So it's cool having our own scientist on the program. We can ask these questions when people say things.
I told you I
Googling
modeled
it
all
afterwards.
the wind currents. I modeled all the wind currents for the whole planet. So
you should put that together, all your maps and models into a book, because I think that would be really interesting for readers to be able to have access to, even if they don't understand it, but just to see the depth and the richness and the science behind their world.
I love
that's so cool.
Those collections of like, here's all the author's notes and here's what they drew, what they thought this animal would look like. And that was actually one thing I told my artist, Cerebral Art, by the way. She's also amazing. So I was like, if we get far enough on this Kickstarter, you and we're going to do a bestiary, and it's going to be a compilation of all the fantasy animals in this world and all the plants and all of this like crazy stuff that I just want an encyclopedia type collection of. And she was like, yes, we got to do that. I'm like, okay, if we can hit these other goals, we're going to hit that next, because that would be super cool.
That would be very cool. And you can have a whole section describing the geography and all the science.
Mm-hmm. I would love it.
You totally have to do that.
I would love
I think you totally have to do that as like a separate.
Like, oh yeah, thing. It would be its own little like booklet type thing. But I also love cooking, and I love foraging and survival foods. So I'm like eventually probably going to do a cookbook too, because I talk about food enough and how foods differ across the map. All of their cultures are very unique, and so I kind of want to do a cookbook. And I don't know if any of the readers enjoy cookbooks derived from their beloved worlds, but I certainly have recipes for this world. So like eventually I should write them all down.
You should do that too, because there are readers who would be interested. Mm-hmm. There was just one on Kickstarter where it was drinks based on this world. It wasn't fantasy though. It was, I don't remember what genre it was. I don't think it was fantasy, but it still was a very cool idea to have like a recipe for drinks that are mentioned in the books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw a really cool, it was informal, but it was a Redwall collection. And if you read Redwall, like those books are oriented around food. The descriptions of food are delicious, right? And so this was a huge collection of like all the recipes that they thought would really be made in Redwall. And I was like, I love this so much because I want me a mincemeat pie.
I don't think I ever read Redwall. It's like one of the few fantasy books that I never heard of until someone mentioned it on the podcast.
Yeah. Well, as an adult, I don't know if you would enjoy them as much as you might. I mean, I still love rereading them, but they're definitely YA targeted. So I don't know. I think they're fantastic, but I also read them when I was, 10. And I have them all still. They're all on my
shelf. I missed that one I don't know when it came out, but I missed it.
Over the course of many years, because there's a lot of them. But
oh wow.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Is there anything else you want to say about Sundering or Midgate or anything that we've been talking about? Science.
I don't know. I guess I'm really appreciate the time. Readers, if you made it all the way through, again, I'll just remind you of the launch sale is on Amazon and my personal site, the code ROGUES. Use one time, it will get you 15% off your direct purchases from my website for your entire order. So do that and you'll get the best deal possible. And otherwise, I hope you guys enjoy my books. I hope you give them a try. I have free downloads of a preview of Liberation if you're just not sure and you want to check it out. Free preview of Marked, so you can check that one out. And I just want more people to come and join me in my world and enjoy it. So thank you for the time.
Thank you for coming. This has been fantastic. We might have to do some kind of special episode about like the science behind like fantasy worlds. Like,
heck yes.
I don't know what we would do in that, but I think that could be very cool. So like we'll have to chat about that, because just hearing you talk, like I think that would be very cool. So we'll see what we can do to make that happen, because I think that would be amazing. Yeah. We'll have to talk about if that should be like other authors on the podcast, just you. I'm open to anything.
That'd be super fun.
I love science. I'm not a scientist, but like I'm very fascinated by science. So not letting this opportunity to get a scientist who's a fellow epic fantasy author, like I'm not letting you go without us getting something figured out for that sometime in the next couple of months. So stay tuned for that, listeners. And I've been your host, Melinda Kucsera, and we've been talking to RM Krogman, and about so many different things. But thank you so much for listening, and don't forget to like, subscribe, all the things, so that when RM Krogman comes back, you'll be notified.
To talk about science.
Yes, to talk about science, and obviously additional books that other books that you will be writing, because you're going to keep you've already told us your publishing schedule out to 2030 here, so
very regimented. I told you.
Yeah, I love that. I am deeply jealous of that, but I'll get over it. It's fine. So yeah, so have a great night or a great day wherever you are.
You too. Thanks again.